What do you get when you put Jackie, the joke man, Martling and Peter Bales on a show called More Stand-Up Memories? You get this. Funny memories, funny stories, comedians and jokes you've seen before. So stay a while and laugh with us at least until you're bored.
What a great intro.
Nothing like leaving them off the last word being bored.
I love it. I love it. Tongue in cheek.
It's a shame it doesn't echo. Bored.
Stand-up memories. I'm Peter Bales. This is Jackie the Joke Man Martling. Another podcast. Let's have some fun.
All right, go ahead. Introduce the show.
A great guest for this podcast. Hal Ennis.
The perfect guest for this theme.
Yes,
of whatever it is you got going here.
Yeah, a man behind the scenes. He goes way back to when we were starting in comedy, and I think we're talking the late 70s.
79.
79. A booker who used to book some crazy gigs, some fun gigs. The memories are flooding back. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Stand Up Memories. And the one and only Hal Ennis. There he is.
Whoa.
It's
There
good
he
to be
is.
here.
That might be the oddest thing that's ever happened.
Did you just see that, Hal?
What was that? Are we doing Italian restaurants now?
That wasn't you. That's not something you're promoting.
That's not
No.
you. That's
Life
Absolutely
back?
nothing.
Life Vac. I thought we had a sponsor for a second that could not wait.
Well, being professionals, we're not thrown by that a bit, are we?
That's the most insane thing. Let's
Wow.
go. Let's keep talking to Hal Ennis. Hey, Hal.
Hey, Jackie,
what's-
how are you?
I got to tell you, in 1995, I put out a CD called Hot Dogs and Donuts, and I hired a publicist, very good friend. She got me on Geraldo and Bill, what's his face from Fox, that idiot.
Bill
and-
Boggs?
No, him too, but Bill
Bill O'Reilly?
Bill O'Reilly.
Bill O'Reilly.
I did
Really?
all
You went
these-
you went
Wow.
on Bill O'Reilly?
I did all these shows,
Wow.
and I got on Politically Incorrect with Bill
Maher.
Maher. And I was on with Lou Diamond Phillips and Alan, who's with the talk show?
Alan
from Canada.
Combs.
No, not Alan Combs. Who's the guy from
Thick, Alan Thick.
Alan Thick?
Oh,
It was a great
Pick of the
gang.
night.
Yeah, and Bill Maher introduced me. He held up Hot Dogs and Donuts, and he gave me this glowing review of my CD. And I was kind of thrown, and we went and we did the show and it was done, blah, blah, blah. And we waved. And on the way out, I said, Bill, that was incredibly glowing review you gave me. And I know you didn't even open the goddamn thing. Why such an incredible review? He said, well, it's the least I could do for the guy that gave me a ride home for my first out-of-town gig. And it was, I had given him a ride home from the Jade Fountain on Route 17 in Paramus, New Jersey. He had been on the show.
The Jade Fountain.
He had been on the Hal Ennis show with the however many of us.
Well, it was the Comedy Caravan, and we were bringing unknowns from New York City out to Paramus. And, you know, the thing is that so many of those people became knowns many years later.
It was amazing thinking about the lineup. You know, the lineups were always incredible. And you had probably a dozen people on a show, right? A lot of
Well,
people.
not that.
We
Really?
would bring out, you know, 3 or maybe 4 New York performers, and then it was partly like an open mic thing. And so, yeah, the show would run much longer with varying qualities. And then, of course, the New York performers were the ones that really, you know, gave it some substance and had people
we
coming
would
back.
drive out there with, I drove out there with Dave Hawthorne, with Eddie Murphy, with Richie Minervini. We came by the carload from Richard M. Dixon's White House Inn, and we always loved what Bob Woods, you know, it was just great fun.
Old time comedians. You had Seinfeld and Larry Miller.
We had Seinfeld, we had Larry Miller, we had Gilbert Gottfried, we had Paul Reiser.
Yes.
You can do name dropping.
Carol
as long as you
Leifer.
want.
Right.
Carol was out. Paul Provenza.
Paul
You know, it
Provenza. Wow.
Rick Overton, all kinds of people.
Yeah.
They were Overton and Sullivan, that
Comedy
far ago,
team. Yeah.
long time ago.
I don't think that they were a team at that point. I think Overton was working on his own at that point.
Oh, maybe.
Okay.
But wow, great times. And I told people for years about the claymation video that you used to show, and I could never describe it accurately enough, and everybody had no idea. Finally, here comes the internet, and now that stupid claymation Jimmy Carter thing is on the internet, and it's just wonderful. The Jimmy the Sea.
The guy who ran those films with us was a guy named Ted Boas. And Ted went on to become a low-budget horror movie director.
I'm still in contact with that guy. I didn't
Oh,
know
you
that was
are?
him. I didn't know that was him showing. That's funny. Oh, I never made that connection.
Yeah, and Ted was my college roommate's best friend in high school.
Wow.
So I got to know Ted through my roommate Charlie. And then when we started doing the comedy thing, Ted said, "Hey, why don't we do a little bit of a warm up with this animation?" And so it was comedy and it was cartoons and it was a whole lot of fun.
It set the mood. Nowadays, a lot of these comedy clubs, they play rap or booming loud, horrible music. I'm like, God, it just sets the wrong mood. That was so funny and low key, and it was wild, and it bordered on not naughty, but the tiniest bit risque. Now, was that a 16 millimeter film?
Yeah, that was the only way to do it back then.
Right.
There
weren't
were no
even
video projectors.
VHS had hardly even begun at that point.
No, it was old 16 millimeter film, and it was cartoons of which was also sort of a bootleg business at that point. But he had this enormous collection of stuff, and he would handpick something, and he'd go, "Oh, people are going to love this," and he'd come in with the Jimmy Carter thing or other stuff like that.
Now, anybody that's watching this, Google Jimmy the Sea, and it's a claymation of Jimmy Carter on a date with literally the state of Georgia. And it's the song Georgia, sung by Ray Charles. And it's just such a fun 3 or 4 minute piece of just fun. That's
now
all.
this would have been the late 70s. Claymation has been around way before the late 70s, but he picked up on claymation, right? He wasn't inventing claymation.
No, and I don't think that Ted specifically was involved in the production of that particular film.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
I think he just had it. When was Gumby?
Yeah, I was thinking about
yeah,
Gumby.
I was about that was a very popularized form of claymation that was doing Saturday morning cartoon shows.
Right. Wow.
As was Davy and Goliath.
Just great fun. Wow.
Yeah.
Did I just go off?
I'm still here.
All
You
right,
still
we're
there?
still here.
Am I still?
What do you remember about the shows, the actual comedy shows and the audiences?
Well, are we talking about the New Jersey production, or are we talking about scouting stand-ups when I would come into the city and I'd be seeing people who were still trying to get their 10 minutes of material together?
Well, let's talk about both. What do you remember when you scouted in the city in the late 70s?
Well, back then I would go and hit all 3 clubs in one night.
We should tell
we
the
go to-
audience, back in those days, there were 3 clubs, the original Improv at 44th and 9th and up on the Upper East Side, Catch a Rising Star, and the Comic Strip.
And that was about it. I mean, Was it Comedy Cellar open at that point?
No.
Or was that
No,
too
no.
obscure?
No, that was not open, not in anybody's mind in those days.
Okay. So we would go and, you know, the house manager knew who I was. And so we'd get a seat and he'd say, I've got somebody you have to see, whether it was Gilbert or it was somebody who'd come in from out of town, um, or Bobby Altman would be coming in,
Uncle Dirty, Bobby Altman.
Uncle
Wow.
Dirty,
Wow.
and he was, the dean of old comedy, wasn't he?
He was.
I mean, he was probably in his 60s. Had to be in his 60s even then.
Right. He was a beatnik. He was still a beatnik, not a hippie, a beatnik. And there was a moment when Richard Pryor and George Carlin were actually on the same panel talking to Johnny Carson, and they brought up Uncle Dirty's name as a joke thief. And he'd be there stealing our jokes at the Improv.
So,
Wow.
yeah. So
Who else?
so
Who
we
else
br-
did you see?
Well, it was all the name dropping that I did
Yeah.
earlier. But I remember one night when I think it was at the comic strip, Robin Williams had dropped in, and this was really in the early days of Mork and Mindy. And Robin Williams and Gilbert Gottfried did an improv together on stage. And it was just totally insane. The audience was just rolling in the aisles. It was a one-time only kind of event. And to see them, to be honest with you, I think that Gilbert really carried it that particular night.
Wow.
And,
He killed it over Robin Williams.
it
Wow.
was really something. But Gilbert was ready to just spin off in odder directions than Robin Williams would. And so
Gilbert would
it
go.
was just
He'd go
amazing.
anywhere. He would go anywhere.
Gilbert Gottfried, to our listeners and watchers, Gilbert Gottfried is a fascinating comic because he was half of the, well, let me put it this way. Half of the audience thought he was a genius and the other half had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, half the audience is rolling in the aisles. The other half was scratching their head, which was just wonderful.
And he exhibited the comedy phenomenon of being sometimes so bad he was good. That's the theory behind The Producers and Springtime for Hitler.
They used to put Gilbert on last at Catch a Rising Star to empty the room. Just because he's so outrageous. For those who don't, he had passed away a couple of years ago. And if you Google Gilbert Gottfried's Amazing Colossal Podcast, before he passed away, him and his partner, Frank Santopadre, they interviewed 300 or 400 guys. I know I did the show like 4 times, and those shows were just amazing. It was just so much fun. But if you listen to those, it's a whole comedy education, God, that must have been so fun for you to just come into Manhattan and just scout for raw talent like that.
It was a lot of fun. But when Paul Provenza made the movie The Aristocrats, I was watching that and I was seeing so many of the acts that we had booked that were now, just a few years later, having come into their own and just having a lot of fun with that really nasty joke.
You must have felt like a proud father watching that movie.
Well, I can't say that we launched anybody's career. The shows that we did were obscure in terms of anybody really taking off from, the Comedy Caravan.
But you gave them money to keep going.
Yeah, I mean, we were
big
paying
deal.
gig.
Yeah.
It was a $50 bill, but back then,
You got 50?
I was doing that on Long Island. The guys they'd always come out because to make $40 or $50, I don't remember. I know I emceed a couple times, but I don't know if that was
$40 or $50 for a set plus a cheeseburger if the chef has time. And I say chef.
Yeah, but but you got lo mein at the Jade Fountain.
which was a Chinese restaurant. And we can only allude to this story. We can't really tell it, and we shouldn't tell it, but we can allude to it. A legendary Long Island comedian, Bob Woods, is famous for making an exit from the Jade Fountain show after having had probably 30 drinks.
He made, as we're leaving, we were standing in the lobby, and, you know, comedians stand around being filthy, and the owner, you know, came out and said, "Oh, please watch what you say, people, family around here." And Wood said, "All right, pal." And he turned around and he cursed some more, and with a nice heavy ethnic slur. And next thing you know, the chef was chasing us. It was
with a machete.
Oh God, it was just
in the parking lot.
Just one of those, you know, way too good to be true stories.
So you remember the comics coming out and having really great sets because they were great shows. That's why they worked. Can you remember anybody who didn't do that well? Who did you watch? We can't have that person back.
If I remember right, like half the people, half the guys were up there, you know, struggling. If I remember right.
Well, I personally enjoyed Freddie Stoller.
Fred Stoller.
There's that's like a Gilbert guy. That's a guy where half the crowd's screaming and the other half is like, what?
And the New Jersey Chinese restaurant crowd just didn't get Fred Stoller. He was just too deadpan for them to think it was anything other than, why is he on that stage?
And those out of town gigs and restaurants and stuff, they were not made for a low key act. You know, they were made for a loud, boisterous, dirty bastard like me. They weren't made for Freddie, you know.
Well, you know, there were guys that worked clean, and there were guys that worked dirty. And we would take both. It's not as if, you know, we had to be running a PG kind of program. But you know, there were guys that were just going to be foul mouthed, funny as hell, but foul mouthed. And then there'd be, you know, guys like Jerry Seinfeld, always clean, never did anything blue at all. But you know, it was a cross section, and each one of them came with their particular style, and that was the beauty of it, because you know, people would come, they'd say, well, it's going to be a comedy show, but because, you know, and we'd try and balance out the show in terms of who's going to be loud, who was going to be foul mouthed, and decide who was going to be the order was going to be, so that there'd be sort of a flow, so that somebody would come off and then the next guy would just have too hard a time getting the room back.
Right.
I do remember
that. Both of you guys know that.
We all loved working that room because those audiences, number one, if I remember right, it was usually packed or close to being packed, and the audiences were wonderful. You know, what they understood, they rolled with it, you know.
And you know, after a few months, people would actually come up to me and they go, when are you going to bring back this guy or that guy? And, you know, they'd remember a particular bit. And because everybody was working on just getting that, you know, 10 or 15 minute set together, you knew exactly who they were talking about. And we'd say, okay, we'll try and get him back next week.
That was so funny, you know, in the very beginning, somebody said, oh, I saw a really funny comedian the other night, and say, well, what was one of his bits? And they'd say one of his bits, and oh, that was Harry.
We know,
you just knew him back then.
Know, when a person says the bit, we know the comic. But when they're struggling for a comedian's name, we say, name one of his bits, and we immediately know who it is.
Which was just, you know, and now there's 4,000 comedians, so nobody has any idea, you know.
And making an order of a comedy show, that's the first time that's ever come up on this podcast, is important, for goodness sake. Who's going to flow into somebody else? I'm old school. I mean, the comedy clubs now, they pay very little attention to how an order is going to work. Very few female comedians back in those days. You would go boy girl if there was more than one female on the show. Acts that were the sort of the same, you would mix them up. I mean, that
right. If there's something odd like a ventriloquist, you'd put them in the middle between two regular guys.
Right.
You know. Oh, geez, so much fun.
Because and you know, my other business was I was a nightclub disc jockey. And so, in the same sense, when you're laying out your music programming, you don't just do a homogenized thing. You want to build it up, and then you want to bring it down and build it up again,
Right.
and you do genres. And so, it would be the same thing with the comics. You'd want to have, if you're going to have Gilbert, and you're hoping he's going to kill, then maybe you do want to make him dead last because nobody wants to go on after him, or
Right.
Eddie, because Eddie was really strong even in those early days.
And what is Eddie's last name? So the
Eddie
audience.
Murphy. For
There
those
you
of us-
go. Eddie Murphy. He would have been super young in those days.
Well,
Wow.
Gilbert was young also. Gilbert
Yeah.
started at what age? 15.
We were all young, actually.
Yeah, Gilbert was very young too.
We
God,
were all young.
Well,
back
I
then.
wasn't.
you
I
were.
was an old man. In 1979, I was already 31. I had already failed as a musician, and I was on to something new, But it was just great fun. Now, what was the place, the infamous place,
In
was
Fort
it-
Lee.
New York? Was that the name of it?
That was called the New York Connection, and it was convenient for you guys because there was a bus stop nearby coming out of Manhattan. So even the New York City stand-ups who didn't have a car, couldn't get a ride, would take that gig because they'd take the I don't know the A train or the D train up to the George Washington Bridge, Port Authority Terminal, just jump across the bridge, and they'd be able to literally walk to the club.
Right, it was right there. Yeah, and it was easy for me too because it was right on the other side of the George Washington Bridge.
That was a weekend room, wasn't it?
I think I've got some old promotional stuff. Let me see what night was that. New York Connection was on Thursdays.
Thursday. Okay, I'm trying to.
Yeah, the Jade was on Wednesday, and the New York Connection was on Thursday.
It was on Thursday. Okay, I'm trying to
And then I
remember.
picked up another place that we did on Sundays, out in West Orange. But that was a real that was a long ride for a lot of people. That
Wow. Well, that was Rascals, but it was, it was to this day. If I'm going to do something in Jersey and I pass West Orange, I'm like, geez, I used to drive here every Thursday night. Holy mackerel, because I hosted the Rascals Comedy Hour for a year. And man, you didn't even, because back then everything was far.
I used to
Everything was
drive
far.
for over 7 years. I drove to West Orange Rascals on Wednesday nights because I hosted the dating game. And it was the dating game, only I insulted the contestants, And
But it was such a good club.
so fun.
It was so worth the ride,
It was a wonderful. Yeah, I mean, New Jersey just had these shows that were so much fun. They were road gigs if you're from New York, and especially from Long Island. We had such a great time. Did you get David Say out there, or
I
Richard-
recognize the name, but I
Richard
don't
Belzer? Well, Belzer you would recognize.
Yeah, but Belzer wasn't in your
No, he had already
your
hit.
grouping.
He hit a bit before that.
He was already
Yeah.
up and moving ahead.
Yeah, he was
Oh.
getting $60 a show.
Yeah, he wasn't really doing the out of town gigs. I don't remember. him
Yeah,
working,
no, you're right. He would have been, but David Say might have.
Yeah, no, because David Say went to Florida, Fort
Yes.
Lauderdale, and
Yes, David Say, great act many times on the Tonight Show.
great times.
Let me see it on my lineups here. Who else?
Yeah,
we had.
what do you have on? You have some lineups that you can share with us.
You know who we used to book?
Let's see. I had a show. Actually, Peter, you were on this lineup. Rich Scheidner was the MC.
Rich Scheidner.
And it was you, D.F. Sweedler,
Oh,
and Blast from the Past guys, and Scott Blakeman. I can't
Scott
even
Blakeman.
picture.
yeah, Scott's still around.
Scott and D.F. Sweedler is still around.
I keep every time I hear that, I ask you, and you say that.
I know he teaches.
Because he wasn't around when he was around.
He teaches a comedy class at the comic strip. I think he's still teaching it.
Yeah, the rumor is he's still going for his first laugh.
Well, that's harsh.
Well, it's very
That's
harsh.
cruel.
But that's cruel. But I gotta tell you this. When it comes, I think to be a teacher of comedy, when it comes to DF Wheeler, to be a teacher of comedy, a comedian should have at least one good set under their belt before they teach.
You know who else
That's
he used to
hard.
book? He used to book
I like the
Rich Gagliardi.
Rich Gagliardi. Did you book Rich Gagliardi?
Rich Gagliardi was one of the open mic, locals that was performing, who of course has gone on to do bigger and much more recognized performing as Julia Scotti. And so she has transitioned, but
We had Julia Scotti as a guest on our
my
podcast.
girlfriend's agency books her, and she's great. She's
terrific.
She's a good friend.
Rich Gagliardi was terrific, and now Julia Scotti is terrific.
Well, I've kept in touch with Julia Scotti. Actually, it was kind of odd because my name's on Facebook and nobody knows who I am, and I got a message on Facebook. Are you the same Hal Ennis who used to run the Comedy Caravan? And it was Julia Scotti, and I'm going, all right, so who is this woman, and why should I be remembering her name? I couldn't for the life of me figure out who it was. So I said, do I know you? And they said, yeah. And they said, give me a call. And sure enough, it was Rich Gagliardi. So, it's only fair. My wife and I were on vacation, and I knew that Julie had a show going locally in New Jersey. And so unannounced, we showed up, and I got to the show, and I found the MC, and I said, do me a favor. Here's my business card. Take this back and hand it to Julia Scotti. Well, she comes running out. And I can't believe you're here.
That's that's just so great.
And it was great. And she brought me backstage, introduced me to a couple of the other performers, and said, this is the guy who gave me my opportunity, gave me my start. And the same can be said for Ted Kaluka, who
that name too. I remember him. I saw him.
And,
when you say recently now, it could be within the last 10 years. It's crazy because, to this day, once in a blue moon, somebody will come up and say, hey, I remember you from the Jade Fountain, which is, or somebody says, I remember you from Rascals, but Rascals was way after the Jade Fountain. But those times were just so wonderful, but we might get in trouble because I was on John Fugelsang's show with Julia Scotti, and I hadn't seen her in however long, and we're both booked on the show. And I'm like, John, last time I saw Julia, she was Rich Gagliardi.
Oh, are we in trouble?
No, and she had no problem, because we're old friends. I knew her back then, and then didn't see her for decades. But I got emails saying, you son of a bitch. And I never heard the expression before. They said, you dead named her.
Oh.
If you refer to a trans person by their name before they transferred, transphobe, whatever, it's like you're talking about the dead or something. It was so innocent. Like, people really got to lighten up,
Anyway,
but,
she's
at
she's
the
wonderful.
same time, I told her that I was going to be doing the show with you, and I said,
Oh.
what should we do? How should we treat it? And she said, don't worry about it. Do it however it comes up.
Good.
And
to hear.
she was completely comfortable. She said, even on her own Facebook, on her own webpage, it's not something that she hides.
No,
And,
good.
But you got to see her perform. She's funny as hell.
Oh, I've been on a lot of
She is
shows with her. She's great.
Absolutely hysterical.
Just great.
Hal, you were a part of a special time for a generation of comedians. We needed people like you, crazy enough to produce shows. I hope you made a little.
We paid now. We
I hope you
got
made a
the-
little money. I know you. We made a little money, and we had fun, and you had fun,
We had lots of Chinese food.
and it was Chinese food.
But you
Why
know
do
what? I've got the memories because, it's not everybody can say, I knew each one of these performers when they were nobody.
Right now, and back in those days, nobody was taking pictures, right? I'm sure there's not. I don't remember people walking around with cameras. There's so
No.
few pictures of back in those days. Do you have pictures of those
No,
shows or any of those groups?
I don't, and to be honest with you, I don't even think, any of the performers that we're talking about, unless they were, starting to move up, didn't even have headshots.
Right,
it's not
right.
as-
It was
Yeah,
brand new, brand new.
Brand
I
new.
went, listen, we got to wind this down.
I had a Polaroid. Anyway, Hal, it is so great to see you, and so great to share these memories. And thank you for just doing what you did.
And I'm thinking we'll have to revisit this.
Oh,
'cause
we're
it's-
gonna have to revisit this. We will.
Well,
Ha-
I'd be more than happy to join you again.
Oh, Hal, you're great. Thank you, man.
And thank you for the bookings
Peter,
back
good to
then.
see you.
And
Great to see you. Thank you for the Jade Fountain and all those memories.
one last question: is that still there?
The Jade Fountain, I don't believe is there anymore.
I hate to
Paramus
say
has
it, but
changed a lot.
sayonara, sayonara.
Yeah, but
Thank you, Hal.
that's not Chinese. That's Japanese.
What? I'm not going to say it.
We don't. We're not that sensitive.
No,
All right, Hal. Thank you, man. You're great. Thanks for coming on Stand Up Memories. You're terrific.
Always glad. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good night, guys.
Hey, good night to you. I'm Peter Bales. This is Jackie the Joke Man Martling. This show really is Stand Up Memories. We shared some tonight with Hal Ennis, and we will see you next time.
One last thing I got to plug. I am doing a cruise with Richie Minervini and John Ferrantino on the new Stotterdam on Holland, America from February 14th to February 21st. It's the Long Island Comedy Communion reunion, whatever. It's going to be a great 7 days. And I promised them I would plug it as much as I could. So
You're going to be on a rowboat in Lake Ronkonkoma.
Yes.
That's how high end this cruise
with
is.
one oar and no bait.
All right, and you reminded me. This is Paradise Studios, where Bobby, the owner, is just the best, providing podcasting and any audio visual needs you have. Paradise Studios in Massapequa. He has a podcasting school that you should check out. If you want to start or improve your podcast, come to him. He's great at that. And Strong Island Television is the network that we're on live right now.
And last but not worst, thank you very much to our producer, Michael Zinn. who
Michael
we really
Zinn,
appreciate.
who we appreciate as well. Michael Zinn.
And again, Hal Ennis, you're probably a year older now that we're done with the plugs. So thanks again.
And we'll see you next. We'll see you next time
Take care, guys. Thank you.
on Stand Up Memories.